You're listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis, the only podcast focused on the biohealth capital region. Each episode, we'll talk to leaders in the industry to break down the biggest topics happening today in biohealth.
Good afternoon. This is Rich Bendis, your host of BioTalk, and continuing with our tradition of interviewing existing, emerging, and successful serial entrepreneurs. We're doing that today with someone who's been around the horn in the biohealth capital region for many years and started out with one of our early stage biotechnology successes, which we'll learn more from him during this interview. We're talking with Eric Richman, who is the CEO for Gain Therapeutics. Eric, welcome to BioTalk.
Thank you, Rich. Very nice to be here with you. Thank you.
Well, it's nice to see you finally, because it's been a couple years, I guess, since we connected with one another. And last time I had seen you, you were at Brace Pharma with Vincennes, and you're going to tell me everything that's happened before and after that, though, when you introduce yourself to everybody in the audience today. So why don't we start there, Eric? Why don't we give the listeners a little bit about your background and sort of how you evolved here in the biohealth capital region in the bioindustry?
Sure. Yeah, once again, Rich, pleasure to be with you and your listeners. I started my career in a venture capital firm in New York, and it was a company called Healthcare Ventures. And at that time, they decided to take advantage of the Technology Licensing Act of 1986, I believe, where the NIH could license technology to companies. And the head of that firm, Wally Steinberg, sent us to Maryland to identify scientists and start companies around scientists. And I was involved in that effort, and they started several companies. One was Human Genome Sciences. The first one was Genetic Therapy, Inc. with Jim Barrett. And that company also was co-located with a couple of other companies. MedImmune, it was called Molecular Vaccines at the time, and a company called Molecular Oncology. And that's how I got introduced to the area, through Healthcare Ventures. And I had worked on the company Molecular Vaccines. And when it was funded, I came to Maryland to help Wayne Hochmeyer get the company up and running as a startup, and worked with Jim Barrett on genetic therapy and a bunch of the other well-known people in the area that were running companies at that time. So it was a very exciting time. So I started off in venture capital and then had a series of operational roles in various biotech companies, mostly on the business development side or commercial side, and then ended up with the same investors, Healthcare Ventures, and started a biodefense company called Pharmatheme with a few people from MedImmune. And we took that company public through the first SPAC that was done in therapeutics, first biotech SPAC that was ever done at that time.
What year was that, Eric?
Gosh, that was 2007, I believe.
It's amazing how everything comes around again, doesn't it?
Yes, exactly. And, it was, I could tell you a story about that, but that was a hard deal. That was a hard financing to do. But we took the company public. We raised $55 million, and we were off and running. And then after that, I had served on boards of several companies, early stage companies, and I really enjoyed doing that. So after Pharmathene actually sold to Altimmune, which is still in the area. And so I did some board work and then joined Brace Pharma Capital, again, back in venture capital, looking at early stage companies and also working with some of their portfolio companies on the operational side. And after that, I continued serving on boards of companies and financing and working with early stage companies. And I got involved with Gain Therapeutics. And Gain is a very interesting company. I helped them with their Series B financing. I've known the founder and chairman for 15 years or so, and I thought what they were doing was super interesting, super exciting, and I decided to join them as CEO. And we just took that company public in March.
Well, that's quite a journey, because you really have been involved with some of the who's who in the bio world in this region. When you're talking about Wayne Hochmeyer and Jim Barrett, and who later went on with New Enterprise Associates, one of the largest venture capital funds in the world. I mean, the experience you have had is probably irreplaceable and not duplicated by many other people within this region.
Yeah, well, I consider myself very lucky. I didn't realize how extraordinary these people were until I could actually look back. At that time, I was very junior. I just listened to everything they said and did whatever they told me to do. And I had the good fortune of meeting a lot of people in the early days at MedImmune. And as the company became larger and more successful, there are a lot of other people there that now have gone off and started companies. And we remain friends. I'm friends with so many of those people from the early days. It was a lot of fun. And I can pick up the phone and call a number of these people, and you know them all because I've listened to your podcasts and they've all been on the podcasts. And it's like we were just sitting next to each other yesterday. And it's great. They haven't changed and just doing what they like to do.
It is a very neat region from that perspective because basically a lot of people don't leave. They just end up going to different organizations and attracting other people to come here. So that's why it's blossomed so much in the last 10 years. And I have to give a shout out to my vice president of finance, Lynn Brisbane. She saw my calendar today. She said, "You're doing BioTalk with Eric Richman? I used to work for him at MedImmune." And that was a few years ago, though, Eric, right?
I don't know if she worked for me or if I worked for her. I think I've worked for everybody in this region.
Well, I work for her now, so
Okay.
At least she's recognized on this BioTalk. But let's talk about this transition with Gain. And this is a name that's relatively new for people within this region. Talk about, you mentioned 15 years. Talk about the evolution of how you got involved, how you met the founder of it. Talk about its international presence it has, and how you located it and why you're here within the Montgomery County area for its U.S. headquarters.
Sure. So the founders of the company are Khalid Islam and Dr. Lorenzo Leone. And they were involved in a company many years ago in this area called Arpita, where they're developing an antibiotic. And they were involved with another individual and another company called Biopharm TI, which was a Swiss company. And I was an investor in that company. So I stayed in touch with them over the years to see how the company was doing. Khalid is an extraordinary person. He most recently had an amazing experience at Immunomedics. Immunomedics brought the first product for triple-negative breast cancer to the market earlier this year. And he came to that company when it was a $200 million market cap company and was asked to turn the company around. He did so, and then 2 years later sold it for $21 billion to Gilead. And he's had those types of successes in bringing important products to market and also making money for investors. So I always want to know what he's up to because he's always at the forefront of something interesting and something exciting. And ever since my first job in venture capital, the science is really what's driven me. It's been so exciting. I always think it can never get better, and then all of a sudden it gets better. And we find that today. And with the advent of computers and supercomputers, and how that's transforming drug discovery process. And so I was talking to Khalid about what he was doing. He mentioned Gain, and it was a little company in Lugano, Switzerland. And they were using supercomputers to disrupt the area of drug discovery, being able to do things overnight that would typically take a couple of years to do, and being able to identify binding sites on enzymes that nobody has ever characterized before. And these allosteric binding sites actually have the ability to be able to transform the function of these enzymes, increase its activity, or in some cases, decrease its activity. I thought, okay, super cool. I don't know anything about this. I don't know anything about enzymes. I've always done biologics. So we started talking, and I put him in touch with a group that I've worked with previously to help finance the company. We did a Series B financing in July of last year. And I told the investors we were going to generate proof of concept data in relevant animal models and certain lysosomal storage disorders. And we were going to sign a pharmaceutical deal.
And were you CEO at that time, Eric?
I was.
Okay. When did you actually join as CEO?
In July.
July. Okay. Very good.
I'd spent a few months working with them to, get everything together. And so I joined them in July. We closed the financing. I helped them raise the financing, which was easy because these guys are, well known and, investors follow them. And then we announced the deal with Sumitomo Pharmaceuticals in a demyelinating disease, an area to address similar to multiple sclerosis. And it generated some data for our own programs, showing that we could identify allosteric binding sites, we could build small molecules to target them, And we could also enhance their activity, which is very important. And so that led to discussions about the next financing. And we decided to take the company public because the markets, as you know, beginning of this year and the end of last year, have been very receptive to new ideas.
Yeah, and going public, we've been tracking this, that there were 8 IPOs in our region in January and February. There's, I think, in March, another 2, April, another couple. So this is really one of the hottest times since the early glory days that you were involved with before, right, Eric?
It is. I think there are a lot of reasons. First of all, COVID actually brought attention to the returns that biotech companies can have. And I think that, that kind of put biotech on the radar screen for a lot of people, retail investors, for example, but also the funds. These funds have done so well over the last few years, and they have so much capital they have to redeploy. And the way they do it is to take these companies public. They have to also find liquidity at some point. So it's kind of a cycle, not a vicious cycle. It's actually quite a lovely cycle.
Yes, it is.
Because companies now are getting funded. And what's really interesting, Rich, is that this company, Gain Therapeutics, would never have been able to go public a year ago or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It's too early. It's preclinical. And so in the last year, 40% of the companies that went public were preclinical, which is a huge difference from the way things were, many years ago. And in fact, in the first quarter, we saw a $4 billion company go public that was preclinical. So there's room.
Well, congratulations. And then also you did a traditional IPO. You mentioned SPAC back in 2007, but SPACs are hotter than a firecracker right now. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I should say that. I've invested a few of them and they're going okay. But is that something you considered for Gain at the same time?
I did. And, different financings are appropriate for different companies at different times. And in 2007, I took Pharmathene public through a SPAC, and that was extremely difficult because until then, all SPACs had been related to pharmaceutical services, where there was EBITDA, there was predictable revenue, you could forecast what the company's going to do. And then, comes along a biodefense company with no revenue and no products in sight. And we're telling these SPAC investors that we're going to be, this and that. And they had no idea what we were talking about. So we went to Bear Stearns, and Bear Stearns did it. They said it was their first and last SPAC they would ever do. And it was.
Until today, maybe until 2021.
Yeah. But as you know, Bear Stearns disappeared, but their bankers are doing SPACs now. And it used to be a very bad word. If you said SPAC to a banker, they would say, oh, go talk to these people. And now they're marketing themselves and how efficiently they can do SPACs. But for this company, we decided to do it sort of old school, only because the de-SPACing process is difficult. So we want to get this done. We didn't need a lot of capital. We didn't have VCs involved in the company. We didn't need to raise $300 million in a Series B round. We just needed to finance the company for 2 years. And so to do that, we just wanted to do it and get it over with. We didn't want to talk to different SPACs and be one of 200 different companies they look at and then wait for them to make a decision to decide whether or not they want to merge with us. So, for us, it was very easy, and it seemed to be the right it was the right strategy for Gain.
Well, congrats. And probably you'll have less baggage with that as well.
Absolutely.
So, for
yes.
sure. So let's talk a little bit about, we'll get into the science and the technology a little deeper, but talk a little bit about the geographical locations that you have within Gain and who does what where.
Yes. So the development group, they are based in Lugano, Switzerland. And in Barcelona, we have our medicinal chemistry group and our computational modeling group. And so they were working there. They've been there for a few years. And the technology came out of a Spanish company that licensed technology from University of Barcelona about 8 years ago called Minorix. And that team is intact, and they're still in Barcelona. And there's a supercomputer in Barcelona, and there's one in Lugano, Switzerland. And we have access to those. And this is a big part of what we're doing, is bringing together supercomputers and computational biology. So we thought that in order to be a NASDAQ-listed company, we should reflect what we're going to do. And globally, we're a global company. So we're going to be doing clinical studies in the United States. We have research relationships with many different groups in the United States. And so we thought establishing a headquarters in Bethesda, Maryland would be the best for the company. And first of all, I'm here, so it's easy for me. But most importantly, this is a great area. There are so many people here who are looking for early stage companies that are very interested in life sciences, but would like a little bit of risk and a little bit of not necessarily working for the academic institutions or the government organizations or the very large biotechs, but they're looking for earlier stage companies so they can have an impact on the company. And this is an area that you have these individuals. And so, we're going to be building out, of course, over the last year with COVID, we've been virtual the whole time. And there's no need for laboratories for us right now. But over the next year, we will start looking at space and start building out the US staff.
That's super. And then when you talk about supercomputers in Spain and in Switzerland, as you know, we do an annual bioforum, which will be the 7th this year that we normally do at AstraZeneca, but we're doing it virtual again. The theme this year is going to be big bio, big data converging. You can relate to that because you're one of the first CEOs I've talked about the importance of the supercomputers and also this region. For the listeners who don't know it, it's really one of the top quantum computing areas within the United States because the University of Maryland in College Park is listed as one of the top 5 quantum computing universities in the world. So we think that there is tremendous opportunities because of the users of quantum computing, AI, machine learning to converge this. And our region is one that can be one of the leaders in the world in that. But you're one of the first CEOs that's really talked about how do you use supercomputing in the bio and the pharma industry. So I think we're going to ask you to speak at this meeting in September, Eric. Okay.
Okay. Maybe I can have one of our chief scientific officers.
you want one of your super geeks to be able to do that. Okay.
Yeah, because they all have that language.
I'll let you do the introduction to them, right?
Fine. That'd be great.
That's okay. Great. Okay. Let's do a little deeper dive into the company now. Talk a little bit about the science and technology behind GAIN.
Right. So we're developing new medicines that treat diseases caused by misfolded proteins. And misfolded proteins you see as the root cause of many diseases, ranging from Parkinson's disease to a variety of hereditary diseases like Gaucher's disease, Tay-Sachs disease, all the way through. You even see misfolding, protein misfolding in cancer. Protein misfolding is caused by lots of different things, including aging and hereditary diseases. And so what we're doing is we are targeting those proteins that misfold, and we're identifying what's called an allosteric binding site on that protein, if it exists. And then we're developing small molecules that will attach to that allosteric binding site, and that will stabilize the enzyme. So this allows us to target previously unknown and previously undruggable sites. And for example, in the case of lysosomal storage disorders, where we've begun, and we have a portfolio of about 5 product candidates in this area, it's very simple. There's a hereditary, there's a mutation. The enzyme is not in the correct formation and the conformation, so it can't traffic through the cell. It cannot act on its natural substrate. And therefore, the substrate gets built up in the lysosome. And that causes the lysosomal storage disorder. And what we do is we create, first of all, we identify with the use of supercomputers in our algorithm, we're able to identify the allosteric binding site on these enzymes, target them with small molecules, stabilize that enzyme. It can then move through the cell, work on its active, on the natural substrate, and reduce the toxic substrate buildup. And we've shown that, first of all, we've shown that, yes, there are allosteric sites, and yes, we can find them. And we're the first group to describe allosteric sites on several different enzymes. And most importantly, though, not just finding these sites, but creating the small molecules that bind. We can see enzyme stabilization. These are small molecules, so they cross the blood-brain barrier. So if you think about a disease like Gaucher's disease that Genzyme developed a revolutionary product for called Cerezyme years ago, that treats the symptoms of Gaucher's disease, but it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. So it does not treat the neuronal complications of the disease. Our small molecule, we hope, and we expect that it will, and by crossing the blood-brain barrier. So it's a very interesting technology, and it's something that we consider it to be very broad, not just lysosomal storage disorders, but really anywhere where you find misfolded proteins.
And then there was breaking news today. I got a press release on gain that was sent by your PR firm. Didn't have a chance to digest it. Can you talk a little bit about what happened that you announced today, Eric?
Sure, Rich. So, look, my job in the company is to do two things. One is raise capital and let these people we hire do what they need to do. And the second thing is my job is to create value. And this is a preclinical company. And I don't want to wait 10 years to find out if something works or doesn't work. So with the financing, we thought, okay, we generated some data. We show we can stabilize enzymes. We can increase enzyme function. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. And it has effects in relevant animal models that we're looking for. And that's great. But I wanted to show it outside of lysosomal storage disorders. So we talked to some of the best and brightest oncology companies, and they're always looking for novel targets. And we spoke to a company called Zentalis. Their headquarters are in New York. Their laboratories are in La Jolla. And they're a brilliant group of people, absolutely brilliant group of people, and have raised, I think, well over $1 billion in funding. And they have the equipment, they have the wherewithal, they have the knowledge to be able to take these molecules all the way through development. And so we started talking to them, and they said, okay, the name of your company is Gain, but we're also interested in loss of function. So if there's an enzyme, a protein that's causing a certain cancer, we want to shut it off. We want to be able to shut it off. And we asked the question, can it be done? And so that's really the basis of this collaboration. It's a multi-target deal. It's 5 targets. We brought in an advisor who was also with us at Brace Pharma Capital, Dr. Sam Broder, the former director of the National Cancer Institute. And he worked very closely with us to identify targets that would be of interest, that we thought we would be able to identify and impact the development of products for these types of patients.
And do you have collaborations with NCI going on now, Eric?
We don't.
Is that an opportunity you see for the future?
I do. In fact, I got some emails this morning of some groups I've never heard of before, and I was very interested because that's really what we want to do. Oncology is a key area, but I was at Pharmathene for many years. Okay, no pharmaceutical company wanted to talk to anybody in biodefense. A couple of years ago,
Right.
It was the most unpopular area to be in. Unlike today,
except for today, BARDA's very interested, and so is DARPA.
Right. So. Yeah. Now I find myself in a different place because Big Pharma wants to talk to us. They want to understand how we're identifying these allosteric binding sites instead of classic binding sites on enzymes. They're looking for new targets. And so we really feel, like we can establish additional relationships in different therapeutic areas. So we're very excited to have those types of collaborations. We also announced a collaboration with University of Maryland, Dr. Ricardo Feldman, for his work in Parkinson's disease. And that is extremely interesting, extremely exciting. We'll be reporting that data out in May of this year.
Well, it's great to see you expanding your relationships in your own backyard. And, for the listeners, basically what Eric's been explaining is a platform technology that has many potential uses and many potential partners in the United States and around the world. And you're sort of the intermediary connecting the dots right now, right, Eric?
That's exactly right. Yes.
And I think I see part of your criteria is they have to have a pretty good location. If you're doing La Jolla, Switzerland, and Spain right now, and you have to travel to these sites in the future, I guess that's part of your criteria.
Well, I haven't really told too many people this, but it's definitely one of the reasons why I took the job, because the chairman also has a home in Lake Como. So and the CFO lives in Milan. So it's Como, Milan, gosh. Lugano, and Barcelona. And then with COVID, I'm stuck here in Maryland in Potomac. So,
well, what you can do to get a little bit of that is to watch Stanley Tucci on his specialty. Have you seen that?
I love it. Great show.
Yeah, that Lake Como one was excellent. I mean, all of those Italy ones are great. So anyway, we can do one of those in the future. We'll do a remote BioTalk in Italy.
Great.
So let's talk a little bit about the future now. You've laid out the plans and potential licensing deals you're going to be doing. Do you look at potential acquisitions in the future as well?
We haven't really looked at that. There are some complementary technologies that we have thought about, but at this point, our goal is to generate data for our internal pipeline of products in lysosomal storage disorders and make progress in these other areas. And that's really our focus. That's one of the things I learned very early on from Jim Barrett and Rachel King is the requirement to focus. And we are not the NIH. We can't go off in 100 different areas exploring everything that sounds cool. We have a responsibility to our investors. We've made a commitment to them of exactly what we're going to do. Those funds have to be used for that purpose. And if and when there's something that's really interesting, then we would do another financing or do something to think about that. But right now, there are no real plans to do that. Right now, we're in execution phase. We have to deliver on what we said we're going to do.
Understand. And then when you talk about, you had your original partners with Gain, but then you have new investors now in the public market. How do you describe, Bethesda, the BioHealth Capital Region, and the benefits of being headquartered for your U.S. headquarters in this area?
Rich, it's never been an issue, either positive or negative. You can say that you have proximity to the FDA and proximity to NIH. And, there are companies in Australia that are able to make it on time to their meetings at the FDA. And, it's wonderful that we're all part of the same community and we have a lot of the same interests and we see each other in restaurants and stuff like that. But in reality, companies are becoming certainly more global today. And investors don't really care, especially, in the last year. We did this entire roadshow, this whole financings, a Series B and an IPO without me leaving this room. I just did it all with, virtually, which was great. But investors are aware. They know that there's something going on in this region. They know that there are capable people here, there are services. But, it used to be that companies in this area would say, I really can't get anything done because there are no investors in the area. That's just not true. I mean, it's the technology. If you have a technology that's going to interest an investor, the investment makes it here, whether it's by, a wire transfer or ACH or, one of those apps.
Or an old-fashioned check.
Or yes. But, if you have a good idea, the capital follows.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, you talk about FDA, NIH and everything else, but it's all about people. If you weren't located in Bethesda and didn't have the relationship with the principals in Gain, it would have never happened here probably.
That's absolutely true. I would not have met them.
So It's all about the people business and the connections you have and the credibility you have as an individual. And, I congratulate you in being able to attract great partners like that and keep them engaged and help them grow this community like we're doing right now. Yes.
And it's going to continue. And, I look around and I see, all of these, I call them second or third generation companies from, some of those original companies. It's great. And they're growing and growing. And, they're not, it used to be that there were only scientists, there weren't commercial people. Now there are commercial people. Now there are business development people. Now there are corporate development people. Now there's, the licensing people. The entire infrastructure that's required to be successful is here.
It's here now. Yeah, you're right. Because, 10 years ago, you didn't have as many people in the commercial world because they were still all preclinical. They didn't have products into the marketplace. You didn't need business development people. You didn't need sales forces, but that's transforming now. And that's really healthy for our region.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the future, about your personal goals and corporate goals. And, you have a history of being able to exit successfully from multiple companies. So what's your personal goals for Gain?
Well, for Gain, I'm not even sure I can think that far. It's a matter of execution and identifying the right people to work with and to make sure we're going after the right targets. And, that's one of the great things about biotech is that you're dealing with incredibly brilliant people all the time. And that's something that's very interesting to me. And, people like Sam Broder and some of our other advisors, and they've given us ideas. We need to execute on those. I think that Gain is going to establish additional relationships with big pharma, particularly in the area of Parkinson's disease. It's really quite interesting that we're now at a point, maybe this is a topic for your meeting down the road, is how a supercomputer can actually select a compound which may have an impact in Parkinson's disease after all the many, many, many failures. It takes a supercomputer to find that. And so we'll be reporting that data and we'll be excited. We'll probably, that's a product that's probably too large for us to evaluate clinically. And so we'll look for a partner for that. But personally, the other things I'm working on, I also am chair of a central lab services company with, this group, Broad Oak Capital in Bethesda, private equity firm. So that's a super exciting company. We're going to do close to $100 million a year in revenue this year, growing like crazy. We do all the central lab services for immuno-oncology companies and rare disease and cell and gene therapy companies. Very, very exciting. And
are they based in the region, Eric?
They are not. They're based in Tennessee.
Okay. Well, maybe we can bring a part of them here.
I was thinking about that, because they were in Seattle, Washington, and we closed that and we brought them to Tennessee. But Tennessee gave us some really amazing economic incentives.
I would imagine. Right.
Yeah. And we're also, I think we're paying $4 a square foot in
Tennessee.
Don't tell Robert Shear and some of these others. But
I won't tell Larry Diamond.
Right. But great people there, great staff. So that's something I'm also working on. And then I'm also working with another group, another private equity investment called Infused Holdings, and it's Horizon Infusions. And this is a business that we established to provide biologics to patients. So early on in my years at commercializing products at MedImmune, we saw that, for RSV disease, you have to give a product every month for 5 months. So you have to have this patient come back. Otherwise, they're not going to be compliant. And also, by the way, if they miss a treatment, that's a 20% hit in revenue. So you have to have a comfortable environment. So we're creating the infrastructure for infusion. So we're working with Viela and some of these other companies that are developing monoclonal antibodies.
You mean Horizon now?
It is Horizon.
Yeah, right.
The launch of Tepezza, Krystexxa, Viela, and these are all disruptive companies. These are taking costs out of the healthcare system by having the infrastructure for patients to come to a clinic, a private clinic, and get infused rather than paying 4 times the amount in a hospital setting. So working on lots of different things, and that's in the pharma services side.
Yeah, we're speaking with Eric Richman, who's the CEO of Gain and serial entrepreneur who's been in this region, working in the bio industry and around it for probably 30 years now, Eric, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So, we're going to close here in a second, but I want to give you open mic. Anything you would like to tell the listeners in the BioHealth Capital region or around the world that may get a chance to hear you, anything you'd like to convey to them?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you for that. And the one thing I would like to say is that not only are there professionals in the community that help each other, and when I joined Gain and we filed our S1, so many people called me and said, what can we do to help? People I hadn't heard from in a long time, just that I've run into over the years, I've been friends with. People want to help. People want to know what they can do to help, which is amazing and is probably very unique to this region. But the other thing that I think is interesting is the kids, the schools. A lot of times I'm speaking at schools or working with youngsters to try to figure out what they want to do. And there's an opportunity to really have an impact on the next generation of little scientists and little business people, little salespeople in the area. And it's great because the parents are really interested in it. The kids are interested. They're really fascinated by the intersection of business and science.
And I know you have a lot of spare time on your hands, so you can create your philanthropic nonprofit to work on creating these little scientists and bioethicists in our region here, Eric. So whenever you want to do that, let us know. We'll help you form that nonprofit.
Yeah, Rich, my message is that if there's somebody that's listening to this and they want to figure out or they want to learn more about the industry, there are people here that are very willing to talk. So, if there's a teenager that wants to figure out how to do this or what we're doing, there's so many people in the area that are willing to help. And so we're very easy to reach.
So if anybody wants to get a hold of you, are you willing to give them your email address here, Eric?
I think I'll give them the number in Switzerland. That's 6 hours ahead.
They'd rather meet with you in Switzerland, that's for sure.
Send me an email. I'll be happy to respond.
We'll be glad to connect anybody that would like to connect with Eric. So come through BHI and me, and we'll make sure you can get connected with Eric. So Eric, this has been fantastic. You've given me 2 or 3 other topics for future BioTalks and some other companies that we probably should talk to. And also some ideas we're just putting the agenda together for our September 13th and 14th BioHealth Capital Region Forum. So, and you're right in the sweet spot there. So we will make sure that we let you introduce someone who can talk about supercomputing and quantum computing. Fantastic. And its relationship to biotechnology. But I appreciate the time you spent on BioTalk today, and I'm sure the listeners are going to benefit from this conversation.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Ray.
Thanks for listening to BioTalk with Rich Bendis.